Imagine, for just a second, that you're playing a video game, but you decided to turn on, God mode.
Oh, yeah. The ultimate cheat code.
Right. You type in the cheat code, and suddenly your character has, infinite health. You have infinite ammo.
Nothing can touch.
Exactly. Every single enemy you hit goes down in one strike, and nothing can even scratch your armor. And, for the first 10 minutes, it is wildly fun.
Oh, totally. You feel invincible.
Yeah, you are running around, an absolute force of nature, destroying everything in your path. You feel completely untouchable. But what happens after, 20 minutes?
Or an hour, yeah.
Right, or an hour. Very quickly, it becomes, the most mind-numbingly boring game you have ever played in your life.
Because there's no challenge anymore.
Exactly. Because without the actual threat of losing, without any real vulnerability or deficit to overcome, the victory becomes completely meaningless.
Yeah, you haven't actually achieved anything.
Right. You're just pressing buttons in a void.
It's so true. It strips the experience of all its psychological reward.
When the stakes are artificially removed like that, human engagement just plummets. We are, hardwired to value things that actually cost us something.
Yes, Zach. And that exact phenomenon, that accidental God, is really at the very center of what we are Unpack Dive.
It's a fascinating topic.
It really is. So we're looking at a fiercely passionate, incredibly methodical video essay from the YouTube channel Nerdword.
Right. The one titled Make Fantasy Awesome Again.
That's the one. And the core argument this creator makes is that modern fantasy television and film have fundamentally broken the rules of the genre.
Yeah, they've basically turned on God mode.
Exactly. They've turned on God mode, they've stripped away the stakes, and as a result, the magic is just gone.
And, the creator's diagnosis is incredibly precise here. They aren't just sitting in front of a camera complaining that things used to be better.
Right. It's not just nostalgia talk. No, not at all. They are performing an architectural teardown of modern storytelling. They isolate the specific structural load-bearing walls that writers have locked.
Wow, yeah. Load-bearing walls is a great way to put it.
And knocking those down is exactly what is causing these massive, multi-million-dollar franchise tentpoles to just collapse under their own weight.
They really are collapsing. So we're going to map out this entire argument for you today. We'll be looking at 4 distinct structural failures that the creator identifies.
Right, the 4 pillars.
Yes. So that's the complete stagnation of character progression, the tragic erasure of the sacrificial friendship, a fundamental misunderstanding of what courage actually looks like, and finally, the shift from a grand sense of adventure into, a suffocating grim void.
It's a lot to cover, but it's so important.
It really is. But before we jump into the deep end here, let's establish some quick context for you. The source material we're analyzing touches on some very, highly debated industry topics.
Yeah, there are some strong opinions in there.
Very strong. The creator has sharp critiques regarding Hollywood writers' rooms, the current state of industry politics, and how gender dynamics are mandated on screen.
Right.
And our job today is to be your impartial guide through this material. We're not here to take a side, endorse, or condemn those cultural critiques.
Exactly. We're just the messengers.
Right. We simply want to accurately deconstruct the creator's argument so you can see exactly how they connect those industry trends to the decline of the fantasy genre.
And I think the best place to start that deconstruction is at the foundation of any, the protagonist.
Oh, absolutely.
Because to understand the cure the creator is offering, we have to look at the disease first. And according to this analysis, the fatal flaw of modern fantasy is an absolute obsession with the, quote, morally gray character.
Right. And the creator comes at this as a massive fan. Fantasy is their preferred genre.
Oh, yeah, they clearly love it.
They point out that, a good sci-fi or a mystery is great, but fantasy, historically, is the undisputed king of escapism.
It really is.
It's the genre that builds those vivid core memories you carry from childhood. It's supposed to have the highest rewatchability factor of anything on a screen.
Because you want to live in those worlds.
Exactly. But the creator argues that Hollywood writers have recently kind of hijack these beloved properties.
Yeah, they use a pretty strong term for it.
They do. They are turning them into what the video calls vanity project. And in the process, they are actively mocking the cherished source material that built the fandom in the first place.
Which is wild. But the primary mechanism of that hijacking is version hero.
Right.
The creator argues that the industry has convinced itself that traditional heroes, people who do the right thing simply because it is the right thing to do, are inherently boring.
Which is such a weird assumption to make.
It is. So writers have replaced them with protagonists who were never originally meant to be.
But I want to define morally gray carefully, because for a long time, the morally gray anti-hero was like the golden goose of prestige television.
Oh, absolutely.
You think of Walter White or Tony Soprano. That gray area used to be praised as the pinnacle of complex writing.
The anti-hero era.
Right. So looking at the creator's argument, at what point did morally gray cross the line from being a complex character study into just being, incredibly pretentious and frustrating?
Well, according to the video, it crosses the line when the moral ambiguity stops being a tragic flaw that the narrative, and instead it becomes a baseline aesthetic that the narrative actually rewards.
Oh, wow. That's a huge distinction.
Right. The creator is pointing out a massive shift in motive. In classic storytelling, a complex hero struggles against their darker impulses, trying to reach an objective.
Like they know they're messed up and they're trying to be better.
Exactly. But in modern fan, according to the source, the protagonist revels in their darker impulses. They lack any anchoring objective principles whatsoever.
Because if you don't have an objective moral principle, what is actually getting you out of bed?
That's the million-dollar question.
And the video lays it out brutally. These modern protagonists are driven almost exclusively by anger.
Just constant anger.
Yeah. They walk through the world with this massive unearned chip on their shoulder.
Yeah.
If it's not anger, it's sheer raw ambition, or it's pleasure-seeking.
Or revenge.
Or revenge, exactly. And the creator notes that revenge is vastly overused, right? Blind revenge.
And the psychology of the writer's room really comes into play here. The source suggests there is this belief that portraying a character who is constantly angry or seeking vengeance somehow equate portraying strength.
Right, like being mad makes you tough.
Exactly. But the creator rightly points out that this results in characters who hide behind, quote, power demonstrations and smug smiles.
Oh, the smug smiles. You see that everywhere now.
Everywhere. They demand moral high ground from the audience without ever doing the agonizing work to actually earn it.
It makes me think of a dietary analogy, actually.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine if you decided you were only going to eat incredibly spicy, ultra-rich, heavy food for every single meal.
Oh, man. My stomach hurts just thinking about it.
Right. But for the first day, it's edgy. It wakes up your palate. You think, wow, this is so much more sophisticated than plain old meat and potato.
Sure, it's exciting at first.
But give it a week. Your stomach is in knots. You're exhausted by the sheer intensity of it. Eventually, your body literally begs for a well-rounded, nourishing meal. You want actual substance.
That's a great comparison.
That spicy diet is the modern morally gray character. It's all added. But there is absolutely zero nutritional value for the soul.
And that lack of nutritional value is exactly why these characters feel so brittle. The source specifically describes them as being in terms of sheer substance and seemingly one bad day away from snapping and killing everyone.
Which is terrifying, not heroic.
Exact. When your entire personality is reactionary anger, you aren't actually a hero. You are a villain who just happens to be fighting slightly worse villain.
Right. You're just the villain we're following with the camera.
Right. Yeah. And the creator makes a sharp point that regular, everyday audiences are rejecting. They are turning off these shows because spending 10 hours with someone who's perpetually arrogant and angry is an exhausting viewing.
It really is. And this ties directly into one of the creator's more pointed cultural critiques, right?
Yes, the industry politics side.
Right. The video argues that this constant state of anger and arrogance is often fueled by a combative nature between the genders that is being deliberately enforced by Hollywood writers.
Right.
The creator views this as an industry echo chamber, prioritizing modern, real-world social friction over timeless fantasy story.
And analyzing that purely through the lens of narrative mechanics, the creator's point is that injecting this highly specific contemporary friction actually breaks the immersion.
How so?
Well, if the characters are constantly litigating power dynamics and trying to assert dominance over one another, often split along gender lines, they aren't fighting the actual dragon or the dark.
Wow, they're too busy fighting each other.
Exact. The internal bickering replaces the epic external plot. The audience recognizes this as a modern writer's room working out its own real-world politics on screen, rather than, inviting the viewer into a fantastical secondary world.
It entirely shatters the illusion.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the very real mechanical consequence of writing a character this way.
The progression problem.
Right. If your protagonist starts episode 1 fundamentally angry, already incredibly powerful, and utterly convinced of their own superiority, where do they go in episode 2 or season 2?
They go nowhere. They are completely paralyzed, which leads directly into the creator's first major pillar for how to actually save the genre. We have to fix character progression.
We've talked about the treadmill versus the mountain climb before on this show, but it applies so perfectly here. Modern character arcs feel like a treadmill.
Lots of sweating, no movement.
Exactly. The protagonist is sweating, they're swinging swords, there's a ton of flashy CGI magic happening around them. They are constantly in motion, but they aren't actually moving forward. At the end of the season, they step off the treadmill in the exact same emotional spot they started in, maybe just a little more cynical.
Yeah, it's exhausting to watch.
But classic fantasy, by contrast, is a mountain climb.
Because the altitude changes the climber.
Ooh, I love it.
Right. In the classic model, there is a mandatory expectation of internal transformative growth from point A to point, and the source emphasizes that this growth historically starts place deficit.
Deficit, like lacking something.
Exact. Classic characters often began their journeys incredibly naive or fearful or physically weak. They didn't know the rules of the world.
They had to get the wind knocked out of them. They were put through the ringer, they experienced heartbreaking traumatic loss, and they were forced to adapt.
Yes.
But the key ingredient that the creator says is entirely missing today is the concept of the cost. In a classic story, the audience is constantly reminded that doing the right thing is going to cost the hero dearly.
And modern fantasy suffers from what the creator calls calcification.
Calcification, like they're stuck in stone.
Exactly. Because the characters start out refusing to show weakness, they can't grow. And the result is a massive decline in viewing them.
Which we are seeing everywhere.
We really are. The source points out that many of these highly anticipated, massive budget shows are being canceled after just a season or two.
Yep.
And they are only remembered later as, quote, humorous anecdotes of bad. They leave zero cultural footprint.
It's sad, really. But to prove what actual gripping progression looks like, the Nerdword video brings up a brilliant case study.
Oh, this is my favorite part of the video.
It's so good. They point to the character of Duncan from George R.R. Martin's A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. The Duncan Egg novellas.
Yes.
Now, for anyone listening who might not have read those books, let's look at why Duncan is the ultimate antidote to the modern, smug, morally gray protagonist.
Duncan is a revelation in this context because he is the absolute antithesis of ambition.
Right.
He is a remarkably simple man. He isn't a magical chosen one. He doesn't have a massive chip on his shoulder.
He's just a guy.
He's just a guy. But he has universal value. He takes his knightly vows incredibly. He starts out quite naive about how brutal the world actually is, but he possesses an unshakable, fundamentally good heart.
And he doesn't just, talk a big game. When the rubber meets the road, he stands up for the innocent, even when it is wildly dangerous for him to do so.
Especially when it's dangerous.
Right. And the creator specifically points to Duncan during the trial of seven. And I think we really need to pause and explain what that trial is, because it perfectly illustrates this idea of paying a cost.
Such a pivotal moment. So, in the story, Duncan defends an innocent puppeteer from a cruel royal prince.
Which is very brave, but very stupid in that world.
Incredibly stupid. Yeah. Because he dared to strike royalty to protect a common, Duncan is forced to defend his own life in a trial of seven.
Wow.
It's an ancient, brutal form of combat where 7 knights fight against 7.
And Duncan is a nobody. I mean, he's a hedge knight with barely 2 coins to rub together. He is terrified.
As he should.
Yeah, he realizes he has likely just signed his own death warrant because the prince can call upon the greatest warriors in the realm. So Duncan has to desperately scramble to find 6 men willing to risk their lives to stand beside him.
Exactly. The narrative forces Duncan to confront the terrifying reality of his own moral compass.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Doing the right thing wasn't a Powery fantasy for him. It was a near-death sentence.
Right.
He enters that trial knowing he survived, but not without immense tragedy. Good men, including a highly noble prince who chose to defend him, die in the mud for Duncan's cause.
That is the cost right there. Duncan doesn't walk away from that trial with a smug smile. He doesn't do a cool pose. He's deeply humbled.
He's devastated.
He's traumatized by the blood on his hands, even if it was spilled for a righteous cause. But that trauma is what fuels his growth. He realizes that being a true knight isn't about glory. It's a heavy, solemn burden. Yeah. He ends up taking on a young squire, Egg, who is desperate to escape his own royal family dynamic. Duncan accepts the responsibility of guiding this young soul. He doesn't want the power, but he takes the responsibility.
And the source summarizes Duncan's arc beautifully. They say he becomes, quote, different people, still with the same values at times, just bigger than who they used to be.
Just bigger than who they used to be. I love that.
It's perfect. He maintained his core goodness, but the trials expanded his capacity to carry the weight of the world. And the creator contrasts this sharply with modern, ambition-driven characters who actively seek power for power's sake.
Right.
Rather than viewing it where Duncan or like Frodo Baggins.
And here is where the creator's analysis of Hollywood's mindset comes into sharp focus again. They argue that one of the main reasons progression has completely stalled is because of how modern female characters are written.
Right. This is a very specific critique they make.
Yes. The video asserts that Hollywood views the vulnerability, the naivety, and the initial weakness required for a true character arc as somehow insulting to female characters.
Right.
Therefore, The writers mandate that these characters must enter the story already perfectly capable, fiercely independent, and emotionally impenetrable.
Which is just a fundamental misunderstanding of why audiences love characters. If you refuse to allow a character, regardless of their demographic, to fail, to be wrong, or to be physically bested in the first act, you have systematically dismantled the engine of narrative progression.
Because there's nowhere to go.
Exactly. Empathy isn't built by watching someone succeed effortlessly. Empathy is built by watching someone fail, suffer, and then choose to get back up.
Yes.
By trying to make these characters supposedly strong from minute one, the writers have actually made them incredibly brittle and boring.
Like we said earlier, if you start at level 100, there's no game to play. But here's the thing. Even a character like Duncan, who is willing to get back up, can't survive a trial of 7 alone. He literally needed 6 other people to stand with him.
He needed friends.
Right. Progression in a fantasy world requires survival. And survival in these harsh environments requires the support system. Which brings us to what the source considers perhaps the most tragic casualty of this entire modern writing style.
The erasure of true friendship.
The absolute erasure of true sacrificial friendship.
And this is where we zoom out from the individual psyche of the protagonist and look at the interpersonal of the story, right?
Yeah.
The creator argues that genuine platonic friendship has virtually disappeared. It has devolved into something deeply...
The phrase the video uses here is just brutal. They say modern characters merely, quote, exist in each other's orbit with varying amounts of friction.
It's sad, but it perfectly describes the modern ensemble cast.
Orbiting with friction.
Right. They aren't a fellowship. They are co-workers who happen to be carrying weapons.
Co-workers. That is so accurate. I think the reason writers do this is because it's an incredibly easy shortcut to narrative tension.
Oh, for sure. It's lazy writing.
Right. If your characters fundamentally dislike each other, if they're constantly sniping and throwing witty, sarcastic insults at each other, you don't actually have to do the hard work of writing a compelling external villain.
Exactly.
The group itself is the conflict. It outsources the plot to interpersonal bickering.
That's a very sharp. And the source identifies a specific structural hierarchy that writers use to manage this friction. They call it the overlord dynamic.
The overlord dynamic. Unpack that for us.
So in classic fantasy, the party of adventurers, but in modern fantasy, the relationships are strictly, you have the protagonist at the absolute top. They are the overlord.
Right.
They are usually stoic, highly precise, morally superior in their own mind, and rarely challenged successfully.
And everyone else in the party, what are they doing?
They exist entirely to be. Their role is to validate the overlord's anger, execute their command, and provide a shallow imitation marauder. If someone steps out of line, the overlord puts them in their place, usually with a biting remark or a show of force.
And the show frames that as a good
Okay,
time.
yeah.
Right.
The narrative frames this as a girl boss or a badass moment, but the creator states point blank that this hierarchical, subservient dynamic is incredibly boring to watch. It completely kills the spirit of peer-to-peer.
So let's look at the alternatives the source holds up, because it really highlights the contrast. Classic fantasy relies entirely on the platonic sacrificial bond.
Yes.
The video cites the gold standard here, Frodo and Sam, or Gimli and Legolas, Harry and Hermione. And from our earlier discussion, Duncan and his relationships with Egg, Raymond, and Prince Baelor.
Take Frodo and Sam as the ultimate baseline. Why does that relationship resonate across? Because it is built on mutual, agonizing sacrifice. While Frodo is technically the master in social standing back in the Shire, the emotional weight of the journey is carried equally. They are peers in...
Peers in suffering, I love that.
Sam doesn't follow Frodo because he is forced to by a hierarchical power dynamic. He follows him out of a profound, enduring love. I mean, he literally carries Frodo up the mountain when Frodo can no longer walk.
I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you.
Exactly.
But, let me test that theory against the modern Hollywood mindset for a second.
Okay, play devil's advocate.
Right. A modern writer might say, look, humans are self. Put a group of people in a high-stress, life-or-death situation, and they are going to argue. They're going to jockey for leadership.
Sure.
Friction, power struggles are just more realistic. Frodo and Sam are too purely good. It's naive. So, according to the source, why does injecting that gritty, cynical realism into the party dynamic actually destroy the specific spell that fantasy is supposed to cast?
Because the entire purpose of the fantasy genre is not realism, it is aspiration. Right. When you build a world full of dragon, dark magic, and world-ending state, the physical and personal struggle is so extreme that standard human selfishness guarantees failure.
Oh, that makes total sense. You can't survive if you're self.
Exact. Friendship in fantasy isn't just a nice aesthetic, it is a vital survival. The source argues that audiences go to fantasy to be inspired by a loyalty that transcends normal, cynical human.
We want to see the best of us.
Yes. We want to see a character look at the terrifying, overwhelming odds, analyze the massive cost of standing by their friend, and say, I am going to war for you anyway.
I'm going to war for you.
Yeah.
When you replace that sacrificial love with a cynical power dynamic where characters are just using each other for convenience, you completely gut the emotional core of the story.
You really do.
And the creator makes a really poignant observation here. They say that watching modern media is so devoid of this connect that when you finally do see a genuine sacrificial friendship on screen today, it feels like, quote, getting a glass of water after coming out of a drought.
Wow. It's a profound statement on what audiences are just starving for right now.
Yeah, we are.
We're starved for earnest. The irony is that in their pursuit of supposedly complex, realistic relationship, modern writers have created a landscape that feels emotionally barren.
Absolutely barren. But stepping up to go to war for a friend or volunteering to take the hit so they can survive requires something very specific from a character.
Courage.
Right. It requires them to look at a terrifying situation and step into it anyway. And that introduces a massive hole in how modern fantasy writes its protagonist, which brings us to the third pillar of the creator's argument.
The total redefinition and ultimate loss of courage.
Exactly. You cannot have sacrificial friendship without bravery.
Yes.
But the deep dive reveals that modern media has developed a fundamental allergy to the concept of fear.
Yes.
Which completely breaks the mechanism of courage.
Which sounds completely counterintuitive at first, right?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, you turn on any of these massive streaming shows and you see characters staring down literal monsters without even... They have their swords drawn, their jaws are clenched, and they look entirely unbothered.
Right, they're posing.
The writers are screaming at the audience, look how brave they are. But the source says this isn't bravery at all.
It is the God mode phenomenon you mentioned at the start of our deep dive. Courage has all but disappeared because the characters are constructed in one of two ways.
What are the two ways?
Well, either they are written to be so exponentially powerful that they literally have no reason to be afraid of anything in their universe.
Right, the Superman problem.
Exactly. Or, tying back to the morally gray aesthetic, they are so thoroughly consumed by their own pride, anger, and arrogance that they are psychologically incapable of feeling vulnerable.
Yeah, the modern writing room seems to equate fear with weakness.
They really do.
If a character's voice shakes, if they drop their weapon, if they admit to their friends that they are absolutely terrified of what comes next, the writers fear the audience will respect, so they remove the fear entirely.
And this is where the creator champions a very classical Stoic definition of heroism. The source states, quote, courage isn't the absence of fear, but rather the judgment that something's more important.
The judgment that something else is more important, that is so key.
Changes everything.
If you are invincible, if you know you're going to win the fight easily, stepping into the arena doesn't make you brave, it just makes you busy. You're just doing a chore.
You're doing a chore. That is such a good way to put it.
Because narratively speaking, removing fear is a mathematical subtraction of tension.
Yeah.
If the character isn't afraid, the audience subconsciously realizes there is no real threat. And if there is no threat, the audience stops caring.
Because why should we care if they don't?
Exactly. The creator argues that this weird, twisted version of bravery that actually masquerades as a power fantasy is deeply alienating. We cannot relate to an invincible demigod who smirks in the face of death.
But we can all relate to being terrified.
Oh, absolutely.
Everyone knows what it feels like to have your heart pounding in your chest, knowing you are outmatched. True courage, being absolutely petrified, but drawing your sword and stepping forward anyway because the person behind you needs protecting. That is a universal human concept.
It really is.
It crosses every demographic, every age group, every cult. When Hollywood removes the fear, they ironically make these physically imposing characters incredibly emotionally fragile in the eyes of the audience.
They shatter an impact.
Right, they shatter an impact because there is no human truth inside.
And the creator explicitly ties this back to industry politics, arguing that there's an institutional mandate to prioritize pride and invulnerability over universal stories of vulnerable courage. But again, looking at this impartially, the narrative result of that mandate is undeniable. The industry has voluntarily thrown away one of the most reliable, iconic storytelling tools ever invented.
Overcoming internal terror for an external good.
Yes, exactly.
So let's pull all these threads together and look at the tapestry they create. We've established that the characters start off with a hollow, morally gray anger.
Yeah.
We've seen how that arrogance paralyzes their ability to progress and grow.
Right.
We've explored how it isolates them, replacing sacrificial friendship with a cynical, subservient hierarchy. And we just broke down how it strips away their ability to display true courage because they are never allowed to be afraid.
So what's left?
Exactly. What happens to the world they live in when you subtract all of those elements?
Well, the environment itself, it stops being a place of wonder and becomes a suffocating trap.
Wow.
And this brings us to the culmination, final call to adventure versus the grimdark.
The grimdark void. This is all about the world build.
Yeah.
The creator reminds us that classic fantasy has always been anchored by a massive, sweeping sense of adventure. It's the promise of leaving the known, mundane world behind, discovering uncharted paths, and offering the audience pure, unadulterated escapism.
And the source heavily utilizes The Lord of the Rings as the perfect model for that. Tolkien places a massive emphasis on the beauty of the known world.
Right. The Shire.
Exactly. The Shire is warm, it's folksy, it's green, and it is undeniable. But the narrative places equal emphasis on the sheer necessity and the profound majesty of the journey outward.
Yeah, going out into the unknown.
There is a sense of discovery. You are venturing into a wider world that is dangerous, yes, but also filled with breathtaking elves, ancient forests, and towering statues.
It's an invitation. A good fantasy world reaches a hand out through the screen and says, come with us. There's more to see.
But modern fantasy has entirely rejected that.
Completely rejected it.
The source argues it has devolved into a suffocatingly gritty, dark, bleak visual and narrative style that actually report.
The genre term for this is grimdark. Right?
Yeah, grimdark.
Originally, grimdark was a specific literary subgenre. Think of the Warhammer 40K universe or Joe Abercrombie's novels, where morality is deliberately absent and violence is grotesque.
Right, it had a specific purpose.
But the creator argues that Hollywood has taken the grimdark aesthetic and applied it as a blanket visual and tonal filter over almost all modern fantasy television. Everything is literally and figuratively muddy.
Muddy is the perfect word for it. The emotional resonance of these modern settings is just exhausting.
Really.
The video describes the characters in these shows as just, quote, plodding along in the same dull, meaningless. Ugh, sounds awful. It is. There is no promise that things will ever get better. There is no vigor to the world. And most damningly, there is no magic. Even when spells are cast, it feels utilitarian, not wonder.
Right. The source explicitly names several massive recent television adaptations that they believe are failing specifically because they suck the interest right out of the room through this overwhelming grimness.
Yeah, they call out The Witcher, The Wheel of Time, and Rings of Power.
Let's dig into those examples because they perfectly illustrate the problem. Take The Witcher.
Okay.
It started with a lot of promise, but the world fundamentally feels like a cynical slog. Every single person in power is corrupt. Every alliance is a betrayal waiting to happen. The magic is bloody and grotesque.
Yeah, there's no hope.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When everything is so uniformly bleak, you establish a flat emotional baseline. Nothing stands out anymore.
Exactly. Because variance is what creates adventure.
Variance, yes.
If you look at the Fellowship of the Ring, the absolute suffocating darkness and terror of the mines of Moria only works so incredibly well because it is immediately followed by the ethereal, restful beauty of Lothlorien.
Contrast. You have to have contrast.
Right. The audience needs to see what the heroes are fighting for, not just what they are fighting against.
And the creator argues that shows like The Wheel of Time and Rings of Power miss this entirely. Wheel of Time takes a classic, high fantasy farm boy adventure and immediately injects a tone of misery and distrust among the core cast from episode 1.
Which just kills the vibe immediately.
And Rings of Power, despite its massive budget and beautiful CGI landscapes, often lacks that earnest, folksy warmth that grounds Tolkien's world. The characters often feel like they are politicking rather than adventuring.
And synthesizing this final point, the creator is arguing that a fantasy world without a genuine sense of discovery is just a hollow shell.
Yeah.
The reliance on this grim, dark, muddy, cynical aesthetic has fundamentally replaced the core promise of the genre.
It makes me think about how we engage with world building. Classic fantasy is like walking into a massive, thriving, living ecosystem. There are dark caves and dangerous predators, but there are also sunlit peaks and quiet valleys. Modern fantasy feels like walking into a massive theme park ride, but all the lights are turned off, the animatronics are broken, and the guide is just yelling at you about how miserable the park is.
That is painfully accurate. Nobody wants to escape into a broken...
Nobody. And without that adventure, without the sacrificial bonds of friendship, without the courage to face actual fear, and without the progression of the soul, well, the source states definitively, quote, fantasy cannot and will not be fantasy at all.
It becomes a different genre entirely, merely wearing the aesthetic skin of fantasy.
That's beautifully said. So let's step back and look at the blueprint the Nerdword creator has laid out for us. It is a very clear 4-step roadmap for saving the genre. Step 1. Abandon the stagnant, arrogant, morally gray protagonist in favor of characters who actually progress, who are willing to be naive, and who pay a heavy cost for doing what is right.
Love Step 2.
Step 2. Stop outsourcing the plot to interpersonal bickering and prioritize sacrificial platonic friendships over cynical, hierarchical overlords.
Step 3.
Step 3. Restore true courage by allowing characters to feel genuine, terrifying fear so they can overcome it for a greater purpose.
And step 4.
And finally, step 4. Leave the depressing, muddy, grimdark void behind and bring back the magical, inviting escapism of a true adventure.
For anyone listening to this deep dive who has felt a vague, hard-to-pinpoint sense of disappointment with recent blockbuster shows, this really provides a crucial analytical framework.
It gives you the words for what you're feeling.
Exactly. You now have a vocabulary to explain why the media you are consuming feels so hollow compared to the stories that built your childhood memory. You can look past the impressive CGI and analyze the structural integrity of the narrative.
You absolutely can. And you don't have to agree with every single critique the creator makes about the politics of Hollywood writers' rooms to see the undeniable mechanical value in this breakdown.
Right. You don't have to take a side to see the structure.
Exactly. It completely changes how you watch television. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final lingering question to mull over.
Okay, lay it on us.
It builds on everything we've unpacked today regarding the reflection between art and life. If our modern fantasy media is simply a mirror of our current cultural moment, if it is accurately reflecting a real-world society that is currently fascinated by power dynamics, fueled by reactionary anger, and totally comfortable with moral ambiguity, what will it actually take for us to crave the earnestness, the sacrifice, and the vulnerability of classic fantasy? Are we waiting for the art to change so it can inspire the culture to be better? Or does the culture have to heal first before we can demand better art?
Wow. Art or culture, which moves first?
Exactly. Next time you sit down hoping to escape into a new world and build one of those glowing core memories, ask yourself which side of the mirror you are really looking